November 26th, 2024, coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee. And Secure Some Prices brought to you by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets, so whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION when opening that account. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price, digitally. Mike Rogerson, four-time Juno Award winner, hitting switches and conducting things. Before we go any further, I am so proud of you, partner. You are lambasted by something there. And here you are trooping on from the home studio. So thank you for making the show today.
I'll be honest.
It's been easy.
Post-game bed is looking really good right now. I am looking forward to that.
Guy's downing tea. He's downing meds. He's shivering in there. And, yeah, we'll get you out of here soon enough. Start with the Surrey Mitsubishi poll question. Wow, first of all, what a newsy day here. From the Vancouver Canucks, from the BC Lions, we got it all covered. We'll start with our Surrey Mitsubishi poll question. Will the returns of Brock Boeser and Thatcher Demko offset the loss of JT Miller? Yes or no? You can vote at the Secure Some Price X and YouTube channels. First on Boeser, he's in, he's playing. Get to that in a second. Secondly, on Demko, he is not far away from playing, as our friend Darren Dreger has been telling us for a couple of weeks now, but Patrik Allvin has spoken that in Boston, where the Canucks are set to face the Bruins.
His words, very close to a game-time decision.
Which is really parsing it, but
yeah,
that's where we're at with
he's maybe to a maybe.
Demko. Yeah. Not even baby steps, miniature baby steps. On the poll, I voted no, and here's why. Needless to say, getting Brock Boeser back, getting Thatcher Demko back will help. Boeser is at his best when someone is getting him the puck, a true, first or second line center. It is really hard to replace the offensive production from a first or second line center, particularly when you take a look at the fact that JT plays in all situations, including shorthanded and matchups as well. Then on Demko, yeah, of course, he's a Vezina finalist goaltender. You want him back. Thatcher himself has said, look, he doesn't expect everything to be tickety-boo immediately upon his return. There's still a lot of figuring out to do with this injury. He hasn't played since April. And really, well, their team save percentage actually isn't great. There's been a few games that have inflated that a little bit. For the most part, goaltending has been fine. It was very good early in the season with Kevin Lankinen on that heater. It's regressed a little bit, but whatever upgrade you're getting with Demko may not happen immediately and may, all things considered, be minimal, depending on where his game is at in the early goings.
He's not going to be playing every game.
I voted no. Long-term, yes, but for the immediate term, I voted no.
He's not going to be playing every game even when he comes back, right? So Demko back really means at best 50-50, I think, in the early going with Kevin Lankinen, I would guess. But I think that even Demko back in game number 1, game number 2, probably better than Shilov's right now. And I would think at the very least probably gives his players some confidence from the jump as well. And as far as Brock Boeser is concerned, assuming that he can jump in and be what he was, then yeah, those are two big returns. You'd want everybody healthy. You'd want JT Miller in there as well. But given what we saw versus the Ottawa Senators, without Boeser, without Demko, you start to get each of these guys back over the next 3 games, I'm going to say, you're going to be a pretty reasonable semblance of a National Hockey League team here at this point.
Yeah, I think so. Invite you to get to Surrey Mitsubishi. We were there yesterday, traded in a vehicle, came home with a pre-owned vehicle. She's absolutely delighted. It's her color too, Blake. So she's taking it for its first drive today, because when you trade in any vehicle on a new 2024 at Surrey Mitsubishi, they're going to give you $3,000 above market value for your trade. You can take advantage of rates as low as 1.9%. The extended warranty on the 2024 PHEV, magnificent vehicle, been driving it for a month now, at no charge, plus a $1,000 credit towards winter tires. It is winter tire season, if you've looked at the forecast. Only while inventory lasts, only at Surrey Mitsubishi. They're blowing out the 2024 models. Go see them, 13820 104th Avenue in Surrey, or online at surreymitsubishi.ca.
Whose car is cleaner, yours or hers?
Hers.
Right now, because it's brand new. I mean, in 2 weeks' time, whose will be cleaner?
Oh, great question. Really good question, because mine tends to stay reasonably tidy. Now, I'm not going to say the back compartment is tidy because the golf clubs and all sorts of other things are thrown in there, but the cockpit, the back seat, I maintain a pretty cleanly environment.
We'll revisit it. You
Her,
take
on the
some
other
photos.
Hand, top story brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Foolish Winery. Patrik Allvin, Canucks general manager, has spoken on JT Miller's absence. This is really the first detail that we have got in any way, shape, or form on why JT took leave of the club. He spoke to Ian McIntyre of Sportsnet in Boston. We'll read what he had to say. First and foremost, I'm very proud of JT seeking help. I don't know if he said it, but I believe that he's going to be a better person, a better teammate, and a better hockey player when he returns, and we sure miss him. He's such an impactful hockey player, and I think we have, and the league has all the right support to help him. So, we hadn't heard previously that there was help being sought. We hadn't heard previously that this was more than just about hockey. And so Allvin speaking on JT Miller, and as Darren Dreger told us yesterday, hey, don't think that this is going to be an immediate return upon the end of this 6-game home stretch. Road trip.
And the mention of the league assets and programs is interesting as well. Generally, we have heard that for substance addictions, but we can only assume. Obviously, the NHLPA has mental health programs as well, but that's the first mention that we've heard.
Yeah, it's broader than that. Yeah. And again, typically when it's an NHLPA assistance program, that gets announced, and that wasn't the case here. So I think he's speaking in broader terms with regards to the
it may not be a program per se.
Yeah,
it may not be a program, but it may just be
assets available to help. Right? Yeah. So news on JT Miller and news on Brock Boeser. He is returning tonight against the Boston Bruins. Of course, he has not played since that cheap shot from Tanner Jeannot against the LA Kings a couple of weeks back, almost 3 weeks ago now. Max Sasson exits the lineup. We had a good debate on that yesterday. Who should come out? We wondered if it would be Nils Höglander. Would they dare healthy scratch him here? No, Höglander lives to play tonight. And Boeser spoke yesterday to IMAC. He said it's not fun sitting at home and your head just doesn't stop hurting. It can be frustrating. You've got to have a lot of patience, but I'm feeling better. Again, this is a little bit of news because while we all had, drawn the obvious conclusion that it was a concussion, here was Boeser speaking to the fact that it was a concussion.
A week without symptoms, and Rick Tocchet said that he was approached by Boeser. So I don't know that Rick Tocchet was as anxious, and just in terms of he was probably saying it's a big asset. I don't mind if he sits out for another couple of games, but it sounded like Boeser initiated the return to the lineup, saying, I'm good. It's been a week. I'm good to go. So just the one contact practice, and he drops back into the lineup.
Well, and that contact practice was needed. As Ben Kuzma noted in the province, the contact is a part of concussion protocol that you have to pass through a contact practice before being green-lit to come out of the protocol. Boeser winds up missing 7 games here, the entire 6-game homestand, as well as Saturday's victory over the Ottawa Senators. We talked about it yesterday with Jeff. He was on a hell of a season when he left the lineup. It was 6 goals in 12 games. It was 11 points. He was right on track there to be a 40-goal, 70-point player again. With no JT Miller, his running mate, and really those two have been a sublime duo for the Vancouver Canucks for several seasons now. Well, it's going to be a little tougher playing with Teddy Bluger and Danton Heinen. I'm not sure they're going to have the same offensive impact as a line with JT Miller, but it's just great to see him coming back. As we all know Brock's story, he has gone through so much in his young life. And Tocchet saying, look, Sasson didn't deserve to come out. He felt bad scratching the kid after he generates a point in his NHL debut Saturday, an assist. And, didn't look out of place in the time he did spend. But he told them, be ready for Pittsburgh. And as we discussed yesterday, Blake, with not only these back-to-back games, tonight in Boston, tomorrow in Pittsburgh, but an afternoon start in Buffalo on Friday. And then for us, a morning start. For them, a noon start in Detroit on Sunday. It works even worse than your typical 3 and 4 days or 4 and 6 days. It's really like 4 and 5.5 days with these matinee starts. So tomorrow would seem to be a perfect place to drop somebody in the lineup with fresh legs. I suspect that Höglander and Ratu are playing for the lineup spot tomorrow.
Yeah, that's fair, and that's what you'd want from a coach, just to let a match under them and let them know. It might be as explicit as telling them. I think it's implied at the very least. These players know that they're going to have to be very good to stay in the lineup. There's a lot of games coming up, so as long as you're good, even if you do come out of the lineup, I think it will bode well for you getting back in, because I think Rick Tocchet's going to want to probably rotate some guys in and out over these 4 games anyhow. But you do want to leave a good taste in his mouth at the very least. So I would expect Höglander to be shot out of a cannon, but I want him to use that energy to good, not evil, if you will. Sometimes an overexcited player can find themselves out of position too much, trying to do too much. If I'm Nils Höglander, I'm still staying within myself while playing with a lot of intensity.
What are our friends at Yellow Dog up to?
Well, it's an appropriately named Kolsch. Kiefer Sherwood, Max Sasson, Starborn? Are they Starborn? Yellow Dog just released the Starborn Kolsch. This brew features 4 lucky furry friends from the Make My Pet a Yellow Dog Brewing Star contest. King Buddy, Gus, Yuka, and Winston are their names. And through this collaborative fundraising contest with SPCA, they raised a total of $220,000, over that, in fact. So everybody raised their Kolsch to Starborn and the beautiful pups supporting the BC SPCA.
Hit me with the names there again. Winston and who else?
Winston Yuka, that's EUCA, Gus, and King Buddy.
Oh, okay. Winston, underrated name for a pet.
Yeah?
Yeah, I like it. Short, go Winnie for short, right?
Our cat's Winnie, but it's a girl, so yeah.
Yeah, well, it works.
Winifred.
There you go. Yeah, unisex. More news from Patrik Allvin, again speaking to Ian McIntyre, saying Demko close to being a game time decision. He added that Demko's recovery since camp has actually been better than expected. Wow, think of how dire it was in camp, but knowing that. And he talked about how the goalie's rehab work has been terrific. Yeah, we talked about it yesterday. They're really either the Buffalo game or the Detroit game could both be pretty good spots to drop Thatcher Demko in here, particularly given the schedule that requires them to play these 2 matinee games over the course of U.S. Thanksgiving weekend. I think it goes without saying that Artur Shelovs will be the goaltender demoted. And really, with Lankinen starting tonight, Blake, I think the only question now is, does Shelovs get one last start tomorrow in Pittsburgh, or is that going to be the Thatcher Demko spot? Is he close enough that tomorrow will be his season debut?
My expectation level is sort of 70-30 Shelovs. So I'll be surprised if it's Demko, but not blown away. Like, there's a part of me that's sort of thinking that's what they're thinking. So, but yeah, that would trend that Shelovs is on borrowed time here, and it's not the end of the world for him. He needs to play a lot more than he's been playing. So that's not the end of the world.
Well, we mentioned it's a newsy day, and that extends to one of hockey's biggest personalities. Paul Bissonette, Biz Nasty of the Spittin' Chicklets podcast, of course, also an analyst for TNT. This is quite a story. Having dinner at a suburban Phoenix restaurant, some overserved customers harassing the staff. At least this is how the story goes. For more cocktails, starting to get rough with the staff. Biz steps in, tries to be peacemaker. Next thing you know, hands are being thrown. Next thing you know, Biz is off to hospital with injury.
Kicked in the head several times.
That's what he said.
Not good.
Yet, did you see the mugshots of the 6 guys that he took on there? Some of them look a little worse for wear. So quite a story there. And then he goes on his podcast this morning with Ryan Whitney, former Canucks coach Bruce Boudreau, and Jeff Merrick. And we'll have Jeff on the program Friday. He's joining us now Fridays as a regular guest. And, a fair bit of Vancouver Canucks chatter on Chicklets this morning. Bissonette wondering where the Boston Bruins are going to get their number one centerman, and wondering if it's JT Miller, saying that, it has been documented in the past that he and Elias Pettersson aren't the biggest buddies. Now, Merrick immediately shot it down. And look, I think we talk a lot about potential trades here, but you're talking about pie in the sky stuff, I think, when you're talking about a JT Miller trade. I mean, unless something with this absence has gone the way of making them feel like they've got to make a move there. But for starters, he's not playing. Secondly, he's got a no-move. He doesn't have the no-move clause now. He has a no-move clause later in his contract. But he is such a big part of the Vancouver Canucks, the emotional center, the heartbeat of that group. And, of course, if you're moving him, you're trying to win as the Canucks. So you need a top two center back. And, frankly, if it's a top two center who isn't of the ilk of JT Miller, and there are few of those, and I'm not sure Boston has one.
They do not.
Lindholm certainly is not. Then you need even more than that. So,
Matt, I would extend it to this. Even if you didn't get your center back, even if you thought, okay, you get something else back, and you get a center some other way. Like, there is a list of about 2 players that I would accept back in a trade with the Boston Bruins if you're the Vancouver Canucks trading away JT Miller. It's Charlie McAvoy and it's David Pastrnak. They're not trading Pastrnak, and they're not trading McAvoy, and both those guys have no move clauses. Everybody else is creating work for the Vancouver Canucks. So that's just not happening. There's a lot of other teams. Like, if you're talking the New York Rangers, well then, there's players there for sure. But I think he's throwing pasta against the wall, if you will, is Bissonette, and just throwing out hypotheticals. I mean, there of all the teams, if you wanted to drum up a JT Miller trade to anybody, outside of the fact that Miller would fit and look nice in a B's uniform, but in terms of the roster to come back, there's nobody. The Bruins aren't pulling off this trade.
Miller would look great in anybody's uniform. Yeah. Now, and we're going to get to this a little bit later, but there have now been reports from various insiders, and in some cases more than one insider, that the New York Rangers, the Nashville Predators, and the Ottawa Senators are all looking to make a shake things up trade, that all of them are dissatisfied with their starts. Ken Holland, former NHL GM, Detroit Edmonton, used to always say, American Thanksgiving, you know what you are, you know what you aren't, you know what you need, you know what you got to go get. And frankly, there's enough of a panic seeping in Ottawa because you've changed the owner, the general manager, the head coach there. So there's really nowhere to go above the player roster. New York has been prone to emotionally erratic decisions in the past. A lot of that is driven from their emotionally erratic owner, James Dolan. You may remember the Pavel Buchnevich trade, Blake, which I think they do regret. You may remember the owner being pissed off that Tom Wilson went around beating up his players that one year and decided he was going to move on as coach and shake things up. And then in Nashville, where Barry Trotz, who is a fabulous person but an unproven GM, you do wonder whether there's a little insecurity seeping in there with Barry after spending so much money on those two wingers, Marchessault and Stamkos, and getting very little return. And frankly, we said it at the time that, okay, those are two pretty good players who can probably help you in the near term. The contracts aren't going to age well. And are you going to get the best of them when you don't have appropriate center icemen like they had in Tampa and Vegas, respectively, to get them the puck? When I hear those three franchises specifically are looking to make shake things up trades, Boy, if I'm another GM, my eyes are getting pretty big there because I do wonder if they're willing to make hasty moves because of the urgency of their predicaments. We're coming up to November 30th. That's when Rutherford and Allvin made the Nikita Zadorov trade last year, and that was a little bit different. Basically, the room wanted Zadorov out, and that's what hastened the Zadorov trade. But I do wonder, and especially with this David Jiricek news in Columbus, where Frank Saravelli says it could be a matter of minutes, hours, what have you, before the former 6 overall pick or one-time 6 overall pick in the draft is moved. I just sort of wonder whether we're going to see a blockbuster here somewhere around the NHL before the end of the month.
Yeah, I mean, it's really possible. New York is such a fascinating study. They're 12-7-1. Most franchises are not panicking at 12-7-1, but they've lost 3 in a row. And now they might have almost contributed to their own slide. With this news coming out, they lose their 3rd in a row last night. On the heels of all this reporting, you wonder if that's rattling around the room now, and everybody is sort of wondering, how much longer they're going to be in that room. So the Rangers are certainly something to watch. Team like Nashville, I mean, again, what are you trading there? There's not much there outside of the guys they just brought in. And I don't suspect.
Oh, no, hold on.
Okay.
Hold on.
Okay.
Remember, now, Zachary Leroux is now playing there, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And they just moved Phil Tomasino out, a one-time first-round pick. But if I'm not mistaken, Nashville has something in the order of 6 first-round picks in the system who have not yet touched the NHL. Also, they have 3. They also have 3 first-round draft picks in this upcoming draft. So yeah, Edstrom, Kemmel, Schaefer, Molendijk, the Russian center Svechkov, Leroux is another one. So Svechkov is now playing as well. Yeah, but that's a good number of one-time first-round picks. Not to mention the draft capital, huge draft capital this year. So if Nashville wants to go out and blow their brains out trading futures to get right now help, Nashville is capable of doing that.
But they're going to have to do that with a team like the Pittsburgh Penguins. If we're just talking about the Rangers, the Rangers need roster pedigreed talent
for sure.
So
and they also have the complication that they're talking about Kreider and Trouba. And by the way, Trouba made a big mistake yesterday. I think you're absolutely right when you talk about how the news of this may have unsettled their club. Kreider's got a 15-team no-trade list. Trouba has a 15-team no-trade list, too. As Dreger told us yesterday, Trouba would prefer to come west, but he'd also prefer to stay the full season in New York. And you're right, that has to be a roster player coming back. And in the case of the Ottawa Senators, the word Saravelli reported that is Josh Norris looks to be the guy who might be on the outs there. And look, we talked yesterday a little bit about the Senators' defense, and now they've lost Artem Zub, and I think it's probably difficult to see them making a move there with one of their defensemen because you got Sanderson, Shabbat, Jensen, and then really you're trying to patchwork with the 3 other defense spots. And then you look at their forward group. Well, Giroux's got a full no move. I don't think you're moving Stützle or Brady Tkachuk. I could be wrong there. And so by process of elimination, is that Norris? Is that Shane Pinto, who, of course, had an embarrassing situation last year with the gambling suspension? Is that Drake Batherson, who has some term left on a decent contract as a mid-20s player? Anyways, we're getting to the time of year when NHL general managers assess their roster, see what they need, see what they're missing. And I do wonder whether we're on the precipice here of seeing a big trade or two.
Yeah, it's been a while since we saw a body-for-body trade of import. All-star for all-star trade. I'm kind of ready for something like that to happen. We'll see.
As for the Vancouver Canucks, I think the list is crystallizing of defensemen that you're looking at, and I'm not going to say that this list is exhaustive, but you need a defenseman that's of a certain pedigree, right? At least a guy who can have a case of being a second pair defenseman as opposed to a guy who just fits as a third pair guy. We've talked about Bowen Byram in Buffalo. where he could be he could be a difficult player to re-sign as an RFA with arb rights, knowing that he is third in the pecking order behind Rasmus Dahlin and Owen Power. Cam Fowler in Anaheim, and he's hurt now. We'll see when he gets back. We've talked about Marcus Pettersson in Pittsburgh. Some people don't believe he is a true second pair guy. The same may be said about Trouba. Just discussed him, but at least he can play the right side. Boy, does he have snarl. Severson in Columbus, although that is a hell of a contract to want to get to. The two Montreal guys, Michael Matheson and David Savard. And then CC, if you're so desperate on the right side and you think he can hold down second pair minutes. And Juracek, if you're willing to be patient with a young defenseman. He certainly has that upside if he's not there now.
Frank saying that Canucks are not in on Juracek.
Yeah. Well, he said they made a call or checked in on. But, yeah, I mean, that doesn't really fit their window, right?
No.
Like, unless you think he's a ready-made defenseman right now, I'm not sure he fits your window. Or unless you just think he's an upgrade immediately over Desharnais Juleson on the third pair, Blake. But, a 6 overall from a couple of years ago, like that's going to require a pretty decent asset going the other way. Even
only to have training wheels on that guy.
Even if Columbus is down on the player, and then secondly, how redundant is he with Tom Wielander, right? Like You're anticipating Wielander to be that sort of profile of defenseman for you. So we'll see. I mean, Rutherford's known as an early mover. I'm sure he and Allvin are right in the mix and making all the calls here and figuring out what's going on. We'll see if they're early movers again. Did you hear the story Bruce Boudreau, and again, going back to the Chicklets podcast, did you hear the story Boudreau told about his cameos?
I saw a headline on it.
Okay. So as you may remember, the Canucks head coach, the jolly Canucks head coach, everybody's buddy, Bruce Boudreau, right, started doing cameos. And if you're not familiar with what cameos are, it's you can go and for a fee get a celebrity person in the public eye to record a personalized message. Birthdays, anniversaries, new job, graduation, that sort of thing. So Bruce had been doing these from his home office. Quote, Patrik Allvin comes in and he says, and by the way, this is the 5th day of camp. You can't do any more cameos. You do them, you're going to get fired. And I'm going, okay, so I cancel them right away. To me, it was such an innocent thing. I never said bad things about anyone. I didn't use the F-bomb ever.
That tells you where Bruce Boudreau was in the priority list, I think, of the Vancouver Canucks at the outset of that season.
I think that tells you where Bruce Boudreau stood with the bosses he inherited after Francesco Aquilini, Canucks owner, hired him ahead of hiring Jim Rutherford, who in turn hired Patrik Allvin. We told you and got a lot of flack for it, and I understand why, because Bruce was so beloved here. Bruce, there it is, that this management group never wanted him and that he was on thin ice and that that they wouldn't extend the option on his contract was a pretty clear signal that Bruce Boudreau wasn't their guy. Now, on the face of it, Blake, I looked at it and knew immediately that doing cameos was probably not going to go over well in hockey culture, especially with old school guys. I also look at Bruce's point and say, look, it's a way to grow the game. It's a way to personalize things. It's a way to have fun, ingratiate more fans. I get all that. I support all that. I just, hockey, no tall poppies, right? Don't go out of your way to cause, don't go out of your way to.
You weren't taking away a significant revenue stream for Bruce. Did he make money doing that? Yes, but not a significant revenue stream. And secondly, it's a slippery slope, I think, for Allvin and the Canucks. They're wondering if he keeps doing this, does something just slip by accident one day? And, we want to be able to monitor what's being said about the organization. And if somebody happens to if he happens to just say a double entendre that he doesn't even realize he's saying because the personal message, I get it. I don't think the manner in which he tells the story is the greatest way to handle it, if that's the way that it went down with Allvin and him. But I certainly get them saying, listen, let's cut this off. And I think it's a little bit different than our normal tall poppy thing. Like, it's just, it leaves the door open for too much to go wrong.
Fair enough. But, that's a heck of a sentence to utter, right? If you keep doing cameos, I'm going to fire you that it got to that. Hey, one other thing that came across my radar yesterday that I thought I'd share, because we have talked about Dylan Guenther in the past, right? The player taken with the 9th overall pick in that draft that the Canucks gave up in the Connor Garland, Oliver Ekman-Larsson trade. We've talked about players the Canucks have moved off of in the past and how they've come back to haunt them. Well, Hunter Brzustewicz was having such a marvelous season last year in the OHL as a right-shot, offensive-minded defenseman that the profile was very attractive. And this time last year, Canucks fans, we were doing shows where Brzustewicz was, peppering into shows, Blake, with how well he was doing in the OHL. And we wondered, is he a sell-high candidate? Is this sustainable for him? Sure enough, here came the Elias Lindholm trade in January, and yes, Hunter Brzustewicz was a part of it. And I don't think that Hunter Brzustewicz would have risen to the level of the second piece in that trade, because, of course, they did move a first-rounder to Calgary as well, without the start that he had, without all the prospect buzz that he was generating as a third-round pick. All the sentences were out there. Oh, rehold the draft. Brzustewicz goes a lot higher than than this from Byron Bader, who's a terrific account to follow. Brzustewicz with 2 points in 18 games in the HL. That's bad news. The way he was trending, really thought he was going to hit the ground running in the HL and immediately be one of the best producing D-men on the team. Now, long way to go there.
Who knows the usage? He might not be in either power play, right? So
he wouldn't be the first young defenseman coming off a sublime junior hockey career to step into the American Hockey League and take his early lumps. He turns 20 years old later this week, so there is still an awful lot of time left for a guy taken 75th overall and whom the Flames acquired. That said, I think if you're Calgary and Craig Conroy, you're probably a little bit nervous about this start. Let's remember, Blake, he was a 92-point defenseman last year.
Yeah.
For Kitchener. He was a point and a third per game. No, we do need context. I hear you. It's playing for the Calgary Wranglers organization, the AHL. We do need context, but still, it's 2 points in 18 games, and for a guy whose calling card was offense, not defense. So I'm just putting that out there. It looks like, as much as we had a lot of Canucks fans bemoan giving up assets for a player in Elias Lindholm that they weren't able to re-sign, and so effectively, getting him for those 3 months in the playoff run, it doesn't look, as of right now, that Hunter Brzustewicz is going to be one of these come back to haunt you.
Well, at the very least, if there's any Canuck fans that thought, no, this guy can jump in. He could be a player in 2 years. No. At the very least, it looks like it'll be a project of sorts for Calgary to get him up to speed. So
let's get to today's menu.
Yeah, the right decision to trade him is my point.
Let's get to today's menu. It is brought to you by Greta, a fantastic spot for all the games, home and away, steps from the stadium, minutes from the arena, pregame, postgame. We'll have some Canucks Army viewing parties there throughout the season. Check out the great street food menu. The Big Mac poutine is decadent. The smash burger is my favorite. The arcade surrounds the bar. An incredible air hockey table. Weekly drink specials. Greta, the place to be, 50 West Cordova. Greta Bar, let the games begin. Cam Robinson of Elite Prospects is going to join us. He's at the Top Prospects game, but we'll talk a lot of Canucks with Cam. And then Farhan Lalji of TSN on the Vernon Adams trade. And the BC Lions, we mentioned it was a newsy day for the BC Lions. The Lions move early on this Vernon Adams trade. There was reasons for wanting to get this done soon. Although I got to say, I'm a little surprised it happened this early in the CFL offseason. There are reasons for that. For some, it was a conundrum where they were losing leverage as every day went by. For others, maybe you could have slow played this a little bit and seen if other clubs were trying to bluff you. Nevertheless, Vernon Adams is a Calgary Stampeder, and Farhan Lalji is going to explain it to us, as well as talk about the Lions coaching search, where, yes, Buck Pierce is a big name there as a former Lions quarterback, but there's a couple other names that Farhan brings up, including a former head coach of the BC Lions, that is worth monitoring as Ryan Rigmaiden, the new general manager, and Neil McAvoy, the VP of Football Operations, conduct this coaching search. Time now for our Bet365 bets of the day, and I got to say, fade me, I have been absolutely abysmal here over the last couple of weeks. Had the Chargers yesterday. Game looked pretty good there at one point. Kid makes that incredible catch in the end zone for Baltimore while being interfered with, and got worse from there. Anyways, John beats Jim, and I'm a loser again on the Bet365 bet of the day. So why don't you go first here, Price?
I will go first, but I have to hurry because they're going to be building a bronze statue for me on the Vegas Strip, I think, based on my recent form in this particular segment. Folks, just listen to every word I say, basically, is my only advice to you. Elias Pettersson and Jake DeBrusk and Kiefer Sherwood forming this great chemistry. What are the chances the streaky Jake DeBrusk doesn't continue his streak as he returns to face the Bruins? Plus 320. 320 anytime goal scored tonight versus the Bruins.
Well, you stole my pick. But
shouldn't let me go first.
You earned it. You had the honors, so to speak, on the tee. I was sage enough to have a backup pick, thinking, he's going to look at DeBrusk at that juicy plus 320 to score against his old team. How about the beat going on for Kiefer Sherwood? If Jake DeBrusk scores, is there not a fair chance that Kiefer Sherwood's going to be in on the goal? They're playing on the same line.
Anytime points?
Not quite as juicy, but Sherwood as an anytime point getter at plus 130. You feeling that?
Yeah, not
Will
bad.
you bless that?
I mean, I don't bless any picks that are straight out of my mouth and brain, but
right.
I mean, it's nice.
Blake the Greek here.
Yes.
Open an account with Bet365. Yeah, exactly. You should move to Greektown. It's in Kitsilano.
I've heard.
I can give you the exact block. Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets, so whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION when opening that account. Cam Robinson coming up next.
I'll be honest, I don't get to many games anymore, whether it be at the arena or the stadium. Ticket availability cost, it's a bit of an issue these days. So I prefer to go where there's atmosphere and I know I can get in. Greta Bar YVR. Soak up all the atmosphere with your fellow fans and enjoy a great night with a great street food menu. I prefer the poutine. Weekly drink specials as well at Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova. And we'll be having our viewing parties there all season long as well. Your pregame, your postgame, it's at Greta Bar YVR, 50 West Cordova. Let the games begin.
To Harrison Price from the historic Wall Center.
I'm in desperate need of the comfort menu today, Matt. Feeling under the weather as I am.
Boy, are you ever.
Chicken pot pie would hit the spot right now. I think there's healing properties to chicken pot pie, particularly from white spots. So that's unverified, but I'm gonna put that out there for myself at the very least. Braised beef burgers, pot roast, mini Yorkies. At this point, I'm willing to bet they all have healing properties for me. You feed a cold, you starve a flu. I'm still hungry, so I'm guessing I have a really bad cold of some sort. Check it out at your local white spot today.
And we're joined now by the Director of Content for EP Rinkside Elite Prospects. It is Mr. Cam Robinson, and we find him in London, Ontario at the Top Prospects game. How are you, Cam?
I'm doing well. Yeah, it's we're having a good time over here chatting with the kids, and we're saying off air there are probably 15 or 20 first-round picks are going to be here this week in London and Oshawa, so we'll get a first-hand look and a little Canadian versus USA battle. It should be fun.
More on that later in the interview, but we start with the Vancouver Canucks, as we always do, Mr. Robinson. And I'm interested because I'm going to guess Kiefer Sherwood didn't get a lot of scouting buzz way back when, and yet here he is playing right wing on the Vancouver Canucks top line with Elias Pettersson and absolutely flourishing. What have you made of Sherwood's ascendancy? And is it sustainable the way he's going?
I mean, it's a great story. I mean, this is a kid who put up big numbers growing up, as most of NHLers do, right? But he even played like a big role in the AHL. And so he has experience playing top line, top six, seeing some power play time here and there on the way up. So he knows how to handle it. But what I've been really impressed with is that he hasn't really changed his game all that much. Like, he's still out there throwing all those hits, but he's not chasing them, right? He's not being like, I need to just go bang everything that moves. He's doing it in a smart way, but he's got the speed, he's got the physicality, and he's got enough playmaking and finishing ability to be able to handle playing with skilled players. And like, my goodness, that top line has really found some chemistry. They're dominating the shot share. They're dominating, the scoring, the possession. They're doing everything you want. Small sample, obviously. So we'll be looking to see if that can maintain even a semblance of that level long term here. But I mean, with Miller out, with Boeser out, now Boeser coming back in, it's been something that the team has desperately needed.
Never mind the scoring. How about the physicality? Like, he's doing extra squats and bench presses every time he makes that hit along the glass. He's picking up a 200-pound player and pressing him up again. He's doing that a lot more than everybody else on the ice. Doesn't that add up? Like, doesn't he hit a wall at some point?
I mean, he's doing that more than anybody in the league, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's and yeah, I mean, it is going to, I guess it's going to wear him down, but it seems like he's wearing everybody else down, and he's still looking strong and spry out there. So, he's been doing his squats. He's been following the Jaromir Jagr trains, maybe 1,000 a day since he was 9. We'll have to ask him. But I think that he can maintain this level of play as long as he's doing it in a smart way. And like I mentioned, not chasing those hits, but letting them come naturally and organically, and then making the plays, right? Like, is that now you're playing on a top line? It's like your number one job is he's going to be out there to be the retrieval guy, to do all the dirty work, but also to make some plays as well too, right? Everybody's going to crowd around Pettersson. That's going to open up ice for him, and he's using that ice to play make and to drive into holes and to pierce into the middle of the ice. It's all gravy right now, and we'll see if it can keep rolling.
Just help me out. If he had the tools and he had the production, how does a guy like that go undrafted and bounce around 3 organizations, Cam?
I mean, it takes some players longer to really kind of get it, right? And so this is obviously the best stretch of hockey that he's played in his professional career. But it's sometimes it's just one of those things that guys, it clicks a little bit later on. He had the tools, he had the speed, but it just didn't all piece together at the right time, especially when you're 17, 18 years old. There are those guys that it just looks like, that skill set isn't going to lend itself to being an NHLer. And that's what it looked like. He was probably going to be an AHL or maybe a Euro Pro or something like that. And he's just kept on ticking along, kept on taking those steps. But I mean, if you're Nashville, you're probably a little disappointed in yourself, because it looks like it's about $100K was what the difference was, is that they didn't want to pay him. And they could sure use Kiefer Sherwood right now, but they're lost Vancouver's game.
Do you think it matters to lose Pettersson? Do you think it matters that he's not a brand name player? That he's got DeBrusk there, so he does have a brand name player. Do you think he cares that it's not a pedigree player alongside him?
No, I don't think so. You want effective players, right?
Yeah.
Do you think the Sedin's worried about Burrows? This kid played in the coast. We don't want to play with him. No, I think you play with guys that mesh well, and it isn't always a first-round pick. It isn't always a 50-goal score that's going to work, right? Sometimes you want that chemistry. Going all the way back to like playing NHL 94 as a kid on Super Nintendo, you need that grinder, you need that playmaker, you need that finisher, right? You got to get that chemistry.
Skinny guy, short guy,
Cam's
big guy.
there in coach GM mode, editing his lines, so he's got all of that. Attaboy. The other end of the roster right now, and who would have thunk this? Nils Höglander, Cam. Plays just 8 minutes and 38 seconds against the Senators. That's the second time. It's a season low, and that's the second time in 6 games where he dips below 10 minutes of ice time. What are you seeing or not seeing from Nils Höglander these days?
We're not seeing any urgency to his game. It's a big issue, and that's got to be the bread and butter, right? That's got to be what Kiefer Sherwood is doing, right? That jam, that ability to go and make things happen, not letting things come to you necessarily, but just going and inflicting something on the game and kind of starting to push your will onto players. And we're just not seeing that. We're obviously seeing the confidence is low and getting lower with each passing game. I'm a little surprised you didn't get the scratch tonight and they're pulling Sasson out instead. But it's they need him. You know, as the kid scored 24 goals last year. They need those goals down the lineup. They need him to be a player that can move up and down the lineup and be a useful bit part and kind of get guys going, which is what he did last year. He was a bit of a spark plug, right? You put him on a different line and he could get him going. And he is just not finding that this year. And I think it's between the ears. Personally, it's one of those things that he's still a younger player. He thought he was maybe fully out of the doghouse and it was going to be smooth sailing, and it's not. And now he's got to find a new level. He's got to dig deep and he's got to pull himself out. And I think that this is, tonight's game, he's got to show up because he might be sitting in the press box if he doesn't.
Is it time to trade him? Would you be worried about the asset value sinking from here?
I mean, if you were going to trade him, like for a defenseman, let's say, you should have done it in the offseason when the value was high. I mean, you could have hoped that it would have continued to climb and that you would have had that piece to use this year, but it's not. I'm not a fan of selling low on a player. Now, if the deal is right and you feel like you're getting value for a young, middle six winger who can score 20, 25 goals, then sure, move him for an asset that you could use right now that's better served, maybe on the blue line. But I wouldn't just be selling him just for selling him in case it falls even further. Because if that's the case, it's like, well, maybe you'll get a fourth rounder like Pod Colson got a couple of years ago, in a couple of years, I should say. So no, I wouldn't probably be pushing to move him, but if his name comes up in trade negotiate or in trade talks, then you see where it goes.
But you're right. He should be shot out of a cannon tonight because he has to know he's number 12 on the rankings. And if he doesn't move his way up the rankings, he's the one coming out tomorrow. Although that can be detrimental for a guy like Höglander, don't you think, where his over exuberance can put him out of position sometimes too? So he'll have to be smart. The other lineup curiosity, never mind that he stays in and Sasson comes out, is that Brock Boeser is going to be on the lost parts and missing things line because there's just nobody suitable for him for a top six assignment. So he gets Teddy Bluger and Denton Heinen.
Yeah. I mean, it's they're going to have to ease him back in a little bit, and they don't want to mess with that top line, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. They don't want any part of messing with that line. They don't want to mess with Joshua and Garland. They're getting Joshua up to speed and keeping that chemistry together. So it's just like, without Miller, where are you going to put Boeser, right? Yeah. And so you just hope that he can come back in, the legs will be there, and maybe the scoring touch can still be there because he was clicking pretty well before he came out, right? Like he was one of the most consistent goal scorers on the team. So you hope that he can find that, generate a little bit, and then finish this road trip up, hopefully get Miller back, and then regain that second top six line for him. And then hopefully everyone can get rolling at the same time, right? That's what we're looking for. I don't know if we've had a game where everybody's been clicking at the same time, right? And we're pushing into December now. It's about time.
Max Sasson has made his National Hockey League debut. He had a point in Ottawa. The family story is fantastic, as per usual, with the first NHL game. Give us the scouting report there, Cam. What do you see right now? What could he be, and where's he going to have to fit as a National Hockey Leaguer?
Fun story, right? Coming out of college, he was highly recruited coming out of there. A good number of teams, 10, 15 teams are all knocking on the door. Vancouver got him. He's a two-way guy. He plays smart with the possession. I loved to see him get that point there the other night with Pops in the stands, just fist pumping and getting fired up. That was a great story. He's worked on some pace things, right? The pace issue a little bit as a transition into the pro game. Had himself a really strong season in the A last year. Productive. The production down a little bit more, but I think he's more finding his game in that defensive role, which is what he is going to have to be at the NHL level, right? He's not going to be a guy that you're looking to push 15, 20, 25 goals. He's going to be someone who can maybe kill penalties for you, play down the lineup, move around a little bit, be a bit, versatility down there, but just someone that you can rely upon. And I think, like I said, I'm a little surprised that it's him coming out of the lineup because I thought he played really well in a very muted role there the other night. He only played 7 or 8 minutes, but he looked good in the situations that he had. And I don't think this is the last that we see him. We could see him, like we said, we could see him tomorrow night too, especially if Höglander has a poor outing.
They played him on the wing. Is he a natural center? Does he fit in the NHL down the middle?
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. I think that he can be a versatile guy. I think he can play down the middle. I think he can win faceoffs with some consistency. I think he can play on the wing if you have someone who's locked into that 4C spot. So he's a useful bit part that you can move around in all 3 forward positions probably.
I'm not going to say that he's escaped prospect status yet, but that's his modus operandi is to put that title behind him. You're in London, and you don't have a penchant for hotel art, folks. He's on the road. The fine pieces behind you there. And you've got your eye on pretty much the entire first round when you look at the talent that's assembled there. I got to ask you about Michael Misa, because he's setting all sorts of records, on pace for all sorts of records in the OHL, and yet liters per second spilled on Michael Misa seems a little lower than on previous record-setting prospect runs here. Is there something to that? Am I just not reading it in the right places? Like, it feels like he's not getting Celebrini, Bedard, or pick your favorite prospect before that kind of shot.
Especially because he had exceptional status, right, Cam?
He did. Now that I think plays a bit of a role in this, is that he had exceptional status and he was excellent as a 15-year-old. Like, I'm pretty sure he outproduced McDavid. I'd have to go back and check out the metrics on it, but I'm fairly certain he outpaced McDavid as a 15-year-old. Then last year didn't take that step forward. Everyone expected him to really blow up. Saginaw, they were going to host the Mem Cup. They were like, this is going to be the Michael Misa show. Was good, but not excellent. But then as the season wore on into that Memorial Cup, he really started to elevate his game. And now this year, the numbers speak for themselves. Not only is he scoring at a goal per game, 2 points per game. I tweeted this out the other day. In the last 40 years in the OHL, the only two guys to score in their draft year at a goal a game and 2 points a game were Patty Kane and Eric Lindros. And Michael Misa is on that pace right now. So you're absolutely right. He's not probably getting the hype that he should be with his production. Really speed-driven kid, 6'1", so he's got fine size. He brings it all: goal scoring, playmaking. He's got a little jam to his game too. I think if anyone's really going to steal James Hagen's spot at the top there, it's going to be Michael Misa, because they're similar players, but he's a little bit bigger and a little bit faster. And then, you add in that piece of that pedigree that he has, being an exceptional status kid, is that he's going to make teams think about it. There's a couple guys that could get in there, depending on who's picking, a kid like Roger McQueen, the big 6'5" center, or a kid like Matt Schaefer, who's going to be a dynamic, probably top number 1 D. So it depends on who's picking where, but Misa right now, if you had to push me, I'd probably say is number 1.
Wow. It is quite a derby for first overall in the 2025 entry draft. I think you probably have to go back to Slavkovsky to find as many candidates or some
true
non-consensus, if you will, for the first overall pick. And you didn't even mention what's his name?
Porter Martone. 6'3", power winger. He's a player as well. And so, talking about those numbers that Misa's been doing, Martone's been clicking at damn nearly that pace all season long as well. His goal totals are a touch behind, but he's still playing at nearly 2 points a game, playing for the Steelheads, playing with Luke Misa, the brother of Michael Misa, the Calgary Flames draft pick. So he's an excellent player and, leader. He's captaining this team at the CHL game. He's a captain there in Brampton. He captained the U18 team and put up a ton of points there last year in Finland. So all this kid does is produce. And I think, firmly in the conversation for 2-3. We'll see if, because he's on the wing, if he can actually get into that conversation at 1. So
Misa's a centerman for you. I've seen him listed as both, but you think he's going to be a center when it's all said and done?
I think so. And I mean, I'm pretty sure he leads the OHL in faceoff wins this year too. Like he's good in the draw. He can, like I said, he can penetrate into the middle, pierce through that. He can, I think he's a centerman long-term for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome stuff. Well, you're right in your wheelhouse there. Enjoy the prospects, Cam. Thank you for this, and we will catch up next week, buddy.
Appreciate it, guys. Talk to you soon.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
So, Harrison Price from the historic Wall Center. This next segment brought to you by Ben Moss. Ben Moss is proudly Canadian-owned and operated with a history dating back more than 100 years. Committed to customer satisfaction. Check out their large selection of Canadian mine diamonds, lab-grown diamonds. They've got mine diamonds with payment plans to suit your needs. There are 5 locations in BC, including Willowbrook and Langley, Coquitlam Center. For more information, check out benmoss.com. Ben Moss, because love is timeless. We bring in TSN's Farhan Lalji. After the big trade from the BC Lions, Vernon Adams is on his way to Calgary for a draft pick and 2 upgraded draft picks. This happens, within 10 days of the Grey Cup and within a week of Ryan Rigmaiden taking over as Lions general manager. Farhan, what are your impressions on the trade?
Pretty much in line with what I expected. I'm glad from the perspective of all three parties, both teams and the player, that this got done soon and that everybody's got a bit of clarity going forward. But, the Lions gave up the 7th overall pick 3 years ago when they acquired Vernon from Montreal. They now get the 9th overall pick. And when you look at some of the upgrades attached to it, it pretty much is a wash. Vernon is definitely a better player than he was when he arrived. He's now a legitimate MOP candidate, all-star level player. But he's also 3 years older, right? He's 30. So, and when you look at what the market potentially was, and I'm sure we'll get into that in a moment, I'm not surprised, because if you're Calgary, and Matt, you've covered this league a long time, you know this, that all these players have big roster bonuses due in mid-January. Nobody wants to pay those roster bonuses, so that becomes the soft deadline. And Calgary could have just said, hey, if there's no market, we'll wait for you to cut him, because you're not going to want to pay that bonus, and that would have happened. So the Lions getting some value in a year where they probably lose a first-round draft pick based on how far over the cap they were. I think it's all in line.
Yeah, well, let's just go through this. So it's the 9th overall pick, the first pick in the second round this year. It's an upgrade from pick 32 to 29 this year, so really only a 3-spot move. And then next year, they get a second, they hand out a third. So if everything went perfect, and that means the Lions win the Grey Cup and have the last pick of the third round, and Calgary's the worst team in the league again, that would be an 18-slot upgrade, although it's probably going to be less than that. I'm not sure that resonates with fans, my dude, especially when you're trading an MOP candidate to a division rival.
I get it, but you've got to have a market if you want to make a significant trade, right? And when you look at the teams around the league, Edmonton kicked tires, but I think they would like to move forward with Trey Ford if they can make that work. And maybe the VA thing was leverage they may or may not have had. People thought Saskatchewan, but I know from digging in at the Grey Cup that all signs point to him re-signing, and not just on a 1-year deal, Trevor Harris, but a multi-year deal, right? Because he was playing the game at a high level when he was healthy. So I think they would like to continue to work together, both offensive coordinator Mark Mueller and Harris. And then when you look at how things finished up in Hamilton, that seemed mid-season that would be a logical candidate. But when you look at how well Bo Levi Mitchell finished, they want to continue with that. So there just aren't enough seats, right, in this game of musical chairs. So you've got to have a market. You need to have two legitimate teams that want the player, and quite frankly, there weren't. There was one, and there were other teams that just wanted to kick tires.
The Lions were hosting the Grey Cup, so I fully get why they wanted to hold on to both quarterbacks for the duration of the season, but just as an exercise.
Yeah.
If they traded him the minute they signed Nathan Rourke, do they get more?
It's a fair question. I don't know that everybody had decided what they were or weren't going to do with their players. And you've also got a player that, is making over $500,000, right? And he's got 2 more years left on his deal north of that with guarantees in 2026. So might there have been a bigger market, right? The wheels were falling off in Hamilton. Edmonton wasn't sure what they were going to do, given that situation with Chris Jones. They hadn't fired him yet. Could there have been a bigger market when that happened? Potentially, but I think the financial ramifications of that make it a little complicated, in a cap league when the cap isn't that large. So I'd probably have to rewind it and take a closer look at it. But I'm not sure how much larger it would have been, to be honest.
You say the roster bonus in mid-January. That's 6 weeks from now.
Yeah.
Was this a little hasty? Was this a rookie GM just wanting to get this out of the way? Could he have slow-played it a little with Calgary and made them fret a little bit, and also got them closer to Christmas and say, hey, you want to market something to your fans before Christmas, you need to give me a little bit more.
I doubt it, and the reason I say that is once Bo signs, Trevor signs, and Trey signs, you have nothing in that moment. So to me, this is the time to get more value before those players have signed. Because once the clarity is real, it devalues the asset that much more, right? And I think those deals are going to be coming within the next 2 weeks, right? I think all those players are going to get done. So, it is a game of chicken, right? Like you could have waited, but, once those situations become clear, then Calgary's got the hammer, right? And you don't want to put yourself in that situation. So at least now you're able to get a first-round pick.
Is there any chance Edmonton or Saskatchewan is bluffing? Because Vernon Adams would be an upgrade over Trey Ford. He would be an upgrade over Trevor Harris. I think both teams know that, and I think both fan bases know that.
Yeah, I don't think they were bluffing. Like I said, having talked to the decision makers involved during Grey Cup week, I don't think they were bluffing. Mueller and Harris work quite well together, and I think they want to continue that going forward as opposed to starting over with different types of systems. Trey Ford in Edmonton, it's the one market where that resonates. So once Ed Hervey got done, I think that was part of Ed Hervey's pitch, that I'm going to put Trey Ford in the best possible position to succeed, which is what they wanted to hear in Edmonton. So I'm not convinced there was a lot of bluffing going on. It becomes so difficult in the small league, right, to play those kinds of games or to make those kinds of gambles. And, the Lions needed a first-round pick, right, because they're going to lose one. So they had to be in a position where they could at least get that back. So to get the 9th overall pick, I think is reasonable, right? I mean, and you look in Edmonton didn't even have a first-round pick, right?
They were willing to pay the price for the cap, going over the cap, probably because of the Grey Cup season. I don't know that they're willing to lose draft picks on a yearly basis. So it's also disappointing for they lose the salary, but it's not like you're just going to go and spend all that money, right? Like you're losing that salary. You might have $100K to spend out of all that.
Yeah, but you're losing that salary, but you've also got to pay Nathan Rourke now his full salary for next year.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got to make sure that you account for that, because he wasn't making that this past season. Right. And the Lions have some work to do, because not only, like, when you look at, I think there are around 25 free agents left, which every team has at this time of year, but there are some players additionally that they've got to renegotiate with. And the one thing with a player like Vernon Adams, when you lose him, boy, like, there are players around this league and in that locker room that love them some Vernon Adams. So you better get some of those guys done, because he's going to be the biggest recruiter going to try to get some players out the door. Like, if I'm the Lions, my next call, if they haven't already made it, is to Justin McInnes, who's a pending free agent, say, look, let's get this done, because I know how much you love VA, and we want to keep you here, right? So, so those are all things that are going to go into it, right? They know who he's going to play for, and, if they've got a little bit of money to get some things done, they can get that done now, because you don't want to wait on a number of these guys.
So Jeremy O'Day and Corey Mason, Saskatchewan, are prepared to go forward with a 39-year-old quarterback coming off an injury-plagued year over a 32-year-old Vernon Adams. You buy that?
I do, truly.
Okay.
And on top of that, Trevor, like, say what you want about VA as a great player, but VA's also had injury history, right?
Fair.
And as he gets older, that becomes significant too, right? In terms of people's thinking. So I think that I think Calgary coveted him the most, right? And look, Saskatchewan, I think, is a logical candidate, but I just don't think they were going to move on from Trevor. You can't have both.
Yeah. So when we asked Rigmate, and it's your job to whip up a market on this, he said, well, it's not my job to whip up a market. And I went, well, bidding war is the best way to go about this. And I mean, if you're telling me that Mason O'Day are happy where that, boy, if Vernon Adams lights it up in Calgary, Mason O'Day, that'll be some difficult questions, not just there, but elsewhere too, right? Like, is Chad Kelly going to be right next year for Toronto? That's a heinous injury he suffered. They're happy with Dukes and Arbuckle going forward?
Well, I think they expect Kelly to miss less time than he did this year. They won a Grey Cup with him missing 10 games.
Fair.
So did Nick Arbuckle do enough that they could say, okay, Nick, we'll ride with you for a month and we'll get Chad Kelly back by then? I don't think they believe it's going to take him to the halfway point of the season. And organizationally, yes, they do want to move forward with Chad Kelly, which, there's certainly reason to be nervous on many levels, not just the physical, but they're prepared to move forward with him, right? So,
and Zach Collaros with his last 3 Grey Cups is still not wearing out anybody's patience in Winnipeg, right?
No, and again, if you bring Vernon Zach's not willing to retire, and if you know Mike O'Shea, you will not find a more loyal person in the world than Mike O'Shea. So as long as Zach wants to play, like, Mike would bring him back when he's 45, right? Mike O'Shea loves him some old players. Adam Bighill, coming off an injury-plagued season, wants to play again. Mike O'Shea is going to welcome Adam Bighill back to the party, right? That's just how it works in that organization, and they should be looking forward, right? Zach's not getting any younger. They should be looking forward, but for them, it's not going to be to carry 2 quarterback salaries that'll cost them $1.1 million between the two of them. They're going to try to build a younger player, and hopefully it takes them there. they're not going to move on from Zach. So it's a weird league that way. And believe me, like I have reached out to every single team in some capacity in the last 2 months on this particular file. And, enough to know what the market was. I think if people expected there to be a frenzy, I just didn't see it.
Yeah. One thing I'm surprised you haven't mentioned yet, and just before anyone thinks I'm being too harsh on the lines here, and Rigman, playing devil's advocate because it's a hard trade for fans to understand, and I get that. Did they feel they had to move before Montreal made a decision on Cody Fajardo or the young Davis Alexander there? Like, are one of those guys moving, and did you need to get in before Montreal made a move with one of those?
Not really. Look, I would be shocked if the Alouettes let Davis Alexander out of the building. He's their quarterback of the future, and my belief is he'll be the quarterback of the present in 2025. So I don't know that people look at Cody Fajardo and Vernon Adams in the same category, right? Like, you could bring Cody Fajardo in at this stage now. Like, I don't know who else brings him in as a starter, right? Like, Cody Fajardo becomes a high-priced backup if Montreal decides to move on. Whereas Vernon Adams is a locked-in starter wherever he goes on day one, right? Whereas, Cody's a fit in Montreal. I don't know that he's everybody's cup of tea as a starter, but Jason Moss has a lot of loyalty to him. They both went through a lot of the same things at the same time in Saskatchewan, whereas everywhere else, I'm not seeing that.
Right, and just to touch them all here, Ottawa's happy with Drew Brown. They're just going forward with Drew.
Yeah, they are, and I'm curious to see, like, they've got a fairly deep quarterback room when you consider Masoli and Dustin Crum and Tyree Adams. So I wonder where Masoli winds up. And bigger picture, if you would have asked me last year going into the 2024 season where the quarterback depth was in this league, like, there was a lot of teams in a panic. Really, only Calgary probably felt good about Matthew Shills, and nobody else did, right? Whereas now, Bo Levi Mitchell's been rehabilitated. Davis Alexander's established himself a little bit more. Jeremiah Masoli's established himself a little bit more. Now, there are going to be options. Jake Mayer's now a backup, right? So there are going to be options league-wide for teams to have a legitimate number two, and I think Cody Fajardo finds himself in that conversation.
Moving on to the coaching vacancy, the Bombers asking permission to speak to Jordan McSimic, the Lions' offensive coordinator. Does that tell you that the Lions are going to hire Buck Pierce here, their offensive coordinator? Winnipeg.
I think there's a good chance, right? I think Buck was somebody that everybody else had penciled in, and for me, like, I think Buck Pierce and Jordan McSimic are quite similar, right? In terms of guys that have never done it before. Obviously, Buck's got the playing pedigree, but guys that people look at as somewhat reserved, not necessarily that alpha, on the surface. How would they handling an entire team and being the face of that? And so then if you're the Lions and you're prioritizing offense, Jordan McSimic gives you the best chance to get Nathan Rourke in a good place. Buck Pierce gives you the best chance to have some culture change, right? Which Jordan McSimic might not give you. So I do think Buck is the leader, going into this process, but I don't believe it's a slam dunk. I think Mark Killam is going to emerge as a leading candidate in both Edmonton and BC, because if you know the guy, when he does his interview, everybody's going to be looking around and saying, why aren't we hiring that guy? And then you've got to justify, if you're Edmonton, do we really want to hire Rick Campbell over that guy? And if you're BC, you've got to say, do we really want to hire, these offensive guys over that guy? I'm telling you, I think he's going to be this year's Corey Mace in terms of the impression he made a couple years ago in his first interview in Ottawa. Don't be surprised if he turns into the belle of the ball.
You don't think Rick Campbell's done deal in Edmonton with Hervey, his old friend who brought him here?
Nope. And,
okay.
Killam's an Edmonton guy, so he would play well there. I think he can fire up the masses anywhere. And here's a dark horse candidate for you in BC. Our good friend Mike Benavides, who's another guy who it's about time someone gave Mike Benavides a second chance at this.
Damn right.
Coaches who have done a lot less have had a second chance. And
my number one thing I was just going to ask you was if they bring in Buck, don't they need a really established old school kind of OC maybe or DC?
OC.
That's the thing, and it's been a long time for Benavides there. So if I want to bring in Buck Pierce, I want Benavides in a more prominent role, ideally. But what is that?
Yeah, it could be DC, an assistant head coach, could be special teams coach and assistant head coach, but I do think there would be a place here for Mike, under Buck Pierce, under Jordan McSimic, maybe under Mark Killam. You never know, right? So, but like I said, in terms of I know that Mike is one of the candidates, right? I think they're going to virtually interview 8 and then shortlist it down to maybe 4. But, I do think Mike should be part of that conversation. And it's time for him to get this, not necessarily NBC, but it's time for him to get a second life in that role. Everybody's better. Look at Jason Moss. Jason Moss was not a great head coach in Edmonton.
No, he wasn't. You're
exceptional
so right.
In Montreal, right?
Yep.
And guys get a chance to get this right the second time, and I hope Mike gets his turn at some point.
It would just pass the 10-year anniversary of Benavidez' firing. He was 33-21 here in 3 seasons as head coach, a .611 winning percentage. Mike's problem was he was 0-3 in the postseason, including that day that Kevin Glenn shot the lights out here at BC Place 2012 in the West Final, and then they weren't able to win 2 semis thereafter under Benavidez.
Well, they never had consistency at the quarterback spot with Lule's injuries, and from a leadership perspective, it was always tough for Mike with Wally upstairs.
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
In terms of where players were going to lean. But, give him different circumstances and 10 years more perspective here, and I think he'd be great at it again.
One last question for you on Buck Pierce, just because somebody mentioned this to me during the Grey Cup. The guy had who knows how many concussions. How right is he at this stage of the game?
Oh.
Do you know how much? Does he have any symptoms? Is there any concern there about fog or anything with Buck Pierce, given how brave he was as a quarterback and the punishment that he took here and elsewhere over a number of years?
Truly, no. That hasn't come up in any conversations I've had with him. And look over in Calgary, Dave Dickinson, who's won a Grey Cup despite how things have gone the last couple of years. His career ended in very similar fashion. I don't sense that's a concern for anybody involved. And I think Buck's going to be, and I think this is one, if he gets offered, he would take, right? Whereas there's always been that conversation with Buck in the last couple of years. How serious is he about leaving Winnipeg? And, and in the case you asked earlier about McSimic, I'd be surprised if he seriously took the Winnipeg opportunity, because if it's not to be a head coach, I think he goes home to Edmonton in whatever capacity it happens to be, whether it's as an OC or not, right?
Yeah, I just have enormous regard for Dave Dickinson and Buck Pierce as competitors and as coaches, so I'm glad to hear that all is well there. Thank you for this, sir. You've been enlightening. Talk soon.
Take care, guys.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
Harrison Price from the historic Wall Center, where you turn game night into a game weekend. Book your stay at the Wall. Enjoy an exclusive Harrison Price rate. Call the hotel 604-331-1000. Mention us. Some blackout date supply based on availability. I got to say, I have spent a lot of time thinking and reading about this Vancouver Whitecaps move with Vanni Sartini, because I think you could argue they were having their best season to date with their best roster to date and the most successful coach that they've had in their MLS history as late as September. And Blake, a change then would have been unthinkable, right?
Mm-hmm.
The way things were going. Then a late season collapse. And had they lost in that wild card round, would we all have expected a coaching change at that point? It really was a tale of 2 seasons for the Caps. But here's what I wonder. Do they have the next guy hired? You've got roster decisions that are coming very quickly here. Would you execute those without the input of a head coach? I saw our friend Simon Fudge at the press conference yesterday tweet, "It was a surprise to hear Schuster say he's only starting the process to find a new head coach now. He thinks he's further along in that process than what he gave away at the presser." Here's why. They have an expansion draft coming up. They've got to protect 12 players no later than December 10th, and they will lose 1 player to the new San Diego team on December 11th. They have the MLS Super Draft on December 20th, where they hold the 15th overall pick in the first round. They have contract options on Takaoka, Pico, Schaff, Caicedo, Bomer. They got Ryan Raposo as a free agent. There's rumors about him with a Chinese club. Axel isn't commenting on any names here. I got to say, I found it curious that Steve and Martin Nash were starting to show up at training late in the season. Is there any chance Martin Nash is a candidate here?
I mean, he shouldn't be, and that's all due respect to Martin Nash. If you're looking for a coach to put you over the top, I think you have to go to a coach that has been there and done that at a high level in a league, MLS or above. I think that's what you're looking for if you're the Whitecaps, not a guy who's just wetting his feet at that level. And again, this is all due respect to Marty Nash. Cross paths with him a lot, but he was an unsuccessful CPL coach. I don't think that's your secret ticket to getting over the hump in the MLS level.
No, but I also wonder how much influence that Steve Nash has on the organization.
I would be rich if he does. The guy doesn't show up for years, and all of a sudden he's got a big sway. Like that'd be ridiculous.
I understand that, but by the same token, Blake, look, this is a team that is not exactly wildly financially successful. And so who knows what goes on at the ownership level. Schuster was asked about ownership's input on the decision on 650 yesterday. He said no. He said, I keep them involved because I don't want them to read it in the newspaper. They stay quiet for personal reasons. They put a lot of money into the club each year to help keep us running, but he said he did not. He said it was his decision, as he said in the statement. He did not march to the drumbeat of ownership here. You've mentioned Jim Curtin, the former Philadelphia coach. NYCFC, Nick Cushing was let go, their head coach yesterday. Blake, I'm not sure if you've got any intel or
no, I don't know his work as well. Jim Curtin's a nice fit is because he comes from a budget-minded team and knows about that and knows about developing players as well. So that's a more natural fit, I think, for the Whitecaps. But I mean, they've got a guy in Vanny at the end of the season that is far more qualified than a guy like Martin Nash. And has already accomplished more. Like if Martin Nash next year came in aboard and had the season that Vanny just had, I would say that's a great season for a first-time MLS coach.
Right.
But that's not what they're looking to do.
So that's the gambit here. Like, how many times in their MLS history have we said, man, the Caps are right on the verge here of really getting rolling and really getting a further foothold in the market? And, time and time again, they have missed those opportunities. If you're worse next year, that's disastrous for the club.
That's the pressure on Axel Schuster. Like
catastrophe.
That's why Schuster can't do something off the board like that. Because if they are worse, it immediately goes back to Axel, and it looks like it was his fault. Because I don't think Vanny makes them demonstrably worse next year. If anything, I think you have some hope that they are better next year. Remember, per your timeline, they were in the top 4 as late as early September. Then they have to play 7 games in 22 days. Some of those without Brian White, some of those without 7 their most important game of the season was against LAFC without 7 starters in their lineup by virtue of the canceled game in August. So, I mean, there are all sorts of excuses / reasons why they collapsed at the end of the season, and they still decided to make this decision. So it's a ballsy move, and it's not one that's impossible to win at. They can win at this, but it has to be the right choice.
I would argue the odds are against them because it's not only the football side, it's not only the soccer side that you just outlined. As we talked about yesterday, as we've talked about over the last 3 years, it is not enough for Vancouver Whitecaps FC to have a head coach that is indifferent by the market.
No.
The head coach of the Whitecaps has to be a brand ambassador. He has got to spread the good word in this market. He's got to be identifiable. He's got to be accessible. He's got to be cheery, friendly, somebody who the market feels good about. And they had that in Vanny as well. So this is a massive, massive hire for Axel Schuster. If you're going to hire a coach who's sort of bland, milk with toast, he has to win at an exponential level. Also news here from Har, journalist covering the Whitecaps, and she does it magnificently for the Daily Hive. The assistants here are all still employed. Mike D'Agostino, who of course had to sub in for Vanny a number of times, Youssef, Brendan Shaw, Andrew Foster have not been let go. They are all still.
That could be procedural. It could be just when the new guy comes in, what do you think? Do I keep anybody? Exactly. It could be that. Exactly. But I hope for their sake that they keep going. Certainly cheery, friendly guys that have always been kind. So I'm hoping the best for them, but we'll see.
Blake, are you ready for a Pete Carroll redux?
In New York, though, with that team?
Mike Tannenbaum, a former Jets general manager, and Rick Spielman, a former NFL general manager with the Vikings. They have been contracted by the Jets to help with their GM and head coaching search, and Pete Carroll is rumored to be a candidate there. Of course, Pete Carroll coached the Jets once upon a time, way, way long ago. In fact, I would bet there are a lot of young Seahawks fans who don't even know that Pete coached the Jets.
He didn't have gray hair.
No, exactly. He had the same enthusiasm, though. That hasn't aged one bit. I got to say, you know my feelings last January when we had that extraordinary, 48, 72-hour period where Bill Belichick, Pete Carroll, and Nick Saban, arguably three of the finest coaches in the history of this sport, all wound up retiring or getting let go. I think the NFL is better with Pete Carroll in it. And frankly, I think the NFL is better with Bill Belichick in it. And I would love to see both of those guys back with the big whistle next season. Surrey Mitsubishi poll question from Monday. We asked you, is Kiefer Sherwood the long-lost winger for Elias Pettersson? Yes or no? What did the people say?
People said, no, they're going to be enthusiastic. We're going to say yes.
They said yes. Percentage?
65.
66, Blake. Very good. Went off the number. And I got to say, it is very heartwarming to me doing this job for the past 13 years. When we fire a poll or some content that really gets smart, informed discussion going. And yesterday's poll question was all of that. Look, there were a lot of people drawing comparisons to Burroughs and the Twins. We did so yesterday on yesterday's show as well. But listen to these comments. Bill, finally a winger that pushes play north-south instead of working the perimeter all the time, i.e. Kuzmenko, Mikheyev, Goldobin, even DeBrusk, kind of. Yeah, we talked about that with Petey. Where's your Kuzi? He's a crash to the net, hard forechecking guy. Creates time and space for P to open up. Throws his body like nobody else in the league. He's also making it easier for DeBrusk. What more could you ask for? Well, Chuck asked for a bigger sample size. He said, no, for now, too small a sample, good early returns. Got to keep it up for 18 months. Robert, maybe, looks good but needs a larger sample. Kempner, I think it's DeBrusk and Sherwood. He needs grit with talent beside him. He doesn't need small and skilled. And then there's Coach B. Or maybe, just maybe, EP40 is finally making his wingers look good.
Well, which is fair to a degree. I mean, many people have said, have criticized him saying he's got to make his wingers better. And that is true for elite centers to an extent. Like, you can't put Driftwood beside that centerman and say, make this a 35 goal scorer. Like, there has to be a baseline of talent for that player to be elevatable, if that's a word.
Right.
And
that's
maybe he's never had that.
And that's where the Burroughs comparison is terrific, right? Mm-hmm. Because Alex had enough skill, enough hands, and enough speed that he could be that guy, even if his profile early in his hockey career wasn't exactly that guy. Mm-hmm. People wanted to typecast him, pigeonhole him into being a bottom six checker, penalty killer, but agitator, all that. And Burroughs said, no, I got more in the toolbox. Let me show you. And I do wonder whether Sherwood is doing the same thing.
And again, fuel for that argument, look around. Look at where all the ex-Pettersson wingers are at right now, and none of them are flourishing where they're at.
Mm-hmm. Errors and omissions. Our friend Yerke has checked in, and I will let you litigate this with him, Blake, because he was asking about whether there was anything in the NHL rule book about calling a major high-sticking penalty for blood drawn, and I see you were.
I showed my work
in his replies. Yes, there was a
1988 rule where they changed it to be that automatic 5-minute in a game for blood, and then 2 years later, it was earlier than I suspected. I'm wrong on that regard. I thought I would have guessed it was 25 years ago, but
yes,
it's 35 years ago. But it only lasted 2 years because they realized the folly of this. It was too black and white. You needed a spectrum there, and so they 2 years later added the double minor possibility. And then the other part he was right about, and I was more speaking, he had the benefit of good luck. PDO is, are the shooters on your line scoring? Are they getting saved? Are they in a funk? Are your goaltenders making stops behind you, or are they just sieves which are sewering your stats? PDO measures that, and he's had the benefit of a good PDO, meaning he's getting saves and his wingers are scoring and his line mates are scoring. So you'd expect a guy with a good PDO to be given every benefit of the doubt that he's going to be playing pretty good himself. But the underlying stats for Cody Ceci suggest that no, he's got good PDO and he's still not able to hold on to the puck a whole lot when he's on the ice.
Well, let's hope Yerke takes all of that and isn't so hasty next time.
Well, on the penalty thing, he was right on the Corsi thing. Yeah.
He was right on one, but 1 of 2, that's not good enough for Yerke. We don't bat 500 around here, Yerke. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Appreciate you spending some time connecting with us. Please do subscribe to all our assorted channels, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Follow on social. That's X, Insta, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Blue Sky. We are live on many of those platforms, noon Pacific weekdays. Friday will be different with the early game. Be 11 o'clock Friday. And please do support all the community sponsors you hear us talking about. Keep it local. Hey, everybody, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.